Welcome. Bienvenue tout le monde. Je vais commencer un peu en français. L'événement ce soir, ça va se dérouler en anglais pour la plupart, mais j'aimerais indiquer que si on a des francophones qui voudraient participer en français, poser une question, on peut trouver quelqu'un à la traduire et faciliter la participation dans les deux langues si on a besoin. Okay, just people should feel free to participate tonight in the language of their choice, at least if it's between English and French. Let me say a welcome. My name is Kevin Skerrett, and I am actually I work for a trade union as a researcher, but I'm kind of here with a bit of a different hat on. I'm a representative of an organization called Solidarity Against Austerity, and it was a handful of people, Kitchissippi, Ward 15 residents, that got together and decided to convene a meeting on this issue that obviously there is some level of interest in. So my task, I've been asked to sort of facilitate and coordinate the panel and the discussion tonight. We do have a sort of a full agenda, and what I'd like to do is just start off describing what the plan is, what the agenda is for tonight, and then offering just a few initial comments of context to explain a little bit about what is Solidarity Against Austerity and why did we decide to organize this session. So the agenda, just to describe it, is my little spiel that I just described. Then we're going to hear from our panelists, which people will have seen on the posters and communications. We've got three interesting panelists. I won't list them all right now, but I'll list them when we get into that part. We'll then have a chance to have a brief period of question and answer to the panel. And then we have an interesting section of the evening that we were calling the Political Forum, where we invited our sitting mayor, our sitting city councillor from Ward 15, Kitchissippi, and any of the nominated candidates for council in this ward to participate, to attend and speak to the issues that we're addressing tonight. And we actually have two, the two, I think, nominated candidates for Ward 15 Council with us tonight. And I'll just hint at a little bit more of that section of the evening. Both Councillor Hobbs and Mayor Watson have sent their regrets for participating directly due to conflicts, but they have submitted some written statements that they've asked us to read out, which we will do. So that's the Political Forum session after the panel. And then the final discussion, the final section will really be a little bit about what do people in the room feel like doing, following up in terms of actions and next steps and strategies that we might take dealing with these issues. So my quick spiel, just to say a little bit about what is Solidarity Against Austerity. Solidarity Against Austerity is a very grassroots network of, for the most part, individuals and activists, many trade union people, students, environmental activists, healthcare activists, and others who reached a conclusion a couple of years ago that the attacks on our public services, our public programs, on workers, on communities, on many of the things that we care about, have reached a point where it's very clear that they're forming a pattern. It's not just one thing. It's really a whole agenda that is hitting people across the board, and it's leading to a much more unequal and unfair society. And that's what we kind of call the austerity agenda, that unfortunately, not just the federal government, which is sort of notorious for it, but increasingly all levels of government are pursuing this agenda. So a number of people got together a couple of years ago and said, you know what, we've got to start doing something about this. There are already different movements, there are trade unions, there's anti-poverty activists, and people that are focused on specific aspects of these cuts and this agenda. But we really need to start talking and operating politically and more ambitiously and figuring out strategies and ways to push back against this agenda. And a group of people got together in early 2012 and said, you know, an ambitious thing to do would be to actually reclaim what used to be the International Workers' Day, May Day, and mobilize a mass mobilization and march against this agenda to the best of our ability. And we did that in 2012, May 1st, 2012, with great success. We had over 1,000 people in the streets mobilized against this broad agenda. There was a lot of focus on the Harper government, but not exclusively. And we had hundreds of members of the Public Service Alliance, federal public service workers, joining us in that mobilization. The group did the same thing in 2013, last May Day, a similar mobilization. It was not quite as large last year, but I think the name and recognition of the importance of what we were trying to do did deepen. And we still had hundreds of people in the streets last year on May Day. And what we did after May Day, I'll just share, is we, as a group, sort of talked about what we did and talked about, look, we've now done 2 May Day mobilizations. Maybe we need to get even deeper into this and start an ongoing organization. This is all volunteers. There's no budget here. But we decided we'd like to start working on a number of campaigns and issues throughout the year. And that's what the group has been trying to do over the last 12 months. We formed what we call a Workers' Action Group dedicated to trying to coordinate solidarity and support for various worker struggles of unionized workers and non-union workers, and other, education working groups and other sorts of campaign efforts along those lines. And just to say quickly, the group kind of reestablished and rejuvenated itself early this year, deciding to once again mobilize a mass mobilization against this deepening austerity agenda on May 1st of this year, and we'll talk about that later, but also started to get into more concrete struggles. And one of the struggles that in fact our Workers' Action Working Group decided to take up was the announcement in December of 2013, just this past December, and now I'm going to transition a bit into the rationale for tonight's meeting. We decided, look, this announcement from Canada Post, and for those of you that don't know the details, December 11th, 2013, it was announced that Canada Post Corporation had developed a new plan for reorganizing our postal service, our public postal service. And it included, most dramatically, terminating all of our home delivery for more than 5 million Canadians. And also included a very significant increase in postal rates, the cost of using the mail. And obviously this is a devastating announcement for all of those 5 million Canadians who continue to depend on door-to-door delivery. But it also includes an announcement of between 7,000 and 8,000 job cuts. Letter carriers and postal service workers will be directly affected by this. So for us, we think this is a terrible announcement, a travesty. This was not what the federal government, what the Conservatives ran their campaign on in 2011. I don't remember this being mentioned. And it was just announced by a Crown corporation that they're just going to close this without any kind of democratic input. So we've decided this is a really important thing, and rather than just communicating with MPs, we noticed that campaign efforts, including principally campaign efforts by the Postal Workers Union, Canadian Union of Postal Workers, CUPW, but also allies and campaigners have started over the last several months to grow city by city. And a reflection of this, some 32 municipalities across the country have already passed a resolution at council indicating some form of opposition to this announcement by Canada Post, which is quite remarkable. Ottawa, the city of Ottawa, where most of us live, is not one of those 32 cities, which I think begs some interesting questions. Why is that? Why have the larger cities and a whole group of smaller cities done this, but not Ottawa? We're going to talk about this tonight, but when we sort of chewed on this, we decided this is important that we actually campaign on and communicate with people about what's happening. And so our first idea was to convene a town hall where we could have some popular discussion and get into this and do some education And a number of us, just to explain why it's here in Kitchissippi, a number of us live in Kitchissippi. And so we decided what better place to start this discussion at a very neighborhood and local level, based in the ward. Now, we've got hopes and ambitions that maybe this happens in other wards, or maybe we take it to a citywide town hall, but for now, this is really the start of this kind of public campaign and project. So I think we all appreciate that you've decided to attend, and you're welcome. I think it'll be very interesting. I'll say maybe quickly, we do have a panel, and I'll just say briefly who we have as panelists. You might have seen it on the poster. Nick Aplin is a longtime friend of mine and also a Kitchissippi resident, and also a senior, objectively speaking. I don't generally think of him that way, but he is a senior, and so the discussion about postal services has been, in part, drawn a lot of attention to which communities are most affected and hit hard by this. So Nick has agreed to share his thoughts. We also have Peter Denley with us, who actually is an activist with CUPW, the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. He's going to share his thoughts. The union has been very active in this struggle already. And we also have a colleague of mine, Shellie Bird, who is a child care activist and trade union leader locally in Ottawa, and she's also active with Solidarity Against Austerity, which I already briefly described. That's the panel, and I'm going to try to cut myself off and just very briefly say that we think, beyond just the value of political education about something important that's happening, we actually believe, the organizers of this forum, that this is a winnable struggle. This is something that a lot of people are very angry to have been informed about. And I really believe this is the kind of thing where if we took a referendum, how many Canadians want to end home delivery of their mail, I think we would win that referendum, and I think that's why there hasn't been a lot of democratic discussion about it. Okay, I'll stop there, and I think I've already described the agenda. Am I missing anything? I'd like to just turn it over to the panel, unless there's any questions or problems. Yes? Okay. With all that said then, let's start with Nick.
I support door-to-door mail delivery because it's just one of the attributes of the kind of society that I wish to live in. In the society I would choose and toward which I'm prepared to work, there would be generally a sense of justice and fairness. There would be little emphasis on consumption, a great deal of emphasis on social solidarity. There'd be equality of opportunity that would lead to a sense of social responsibility. There'd be few, if any, foreign wars. We would not allow our environment to be fouled by corporations enjoying impunity as if it didn't matter what was dumped into the environment. The air, the water, and the soil could nourish our bodies and produce nourishing foods. Our general health would be better. This federal government, the one we've tolerated and endured for nearly 8 years, as well as their appointee running Canada Post, have an ethic I completely oppose. Theirs is totally different from what I see as desirable for Canada and for the survival of a world in which my grandchildren and other kids for generations can expect to live at all, and certainly to live well. The cancellation of door-to-door mail delivery is one more policy that I think is among a group of short-sighted and misplaced policies. Austerity, as practiced by our federal government, works against the interest of the vast majority of people and for the benefit of the very few, the 1% crowd. Budget cutbacks mostly affect those who are least privileged in society, as in unemployment benefits, health care, and home care have all been reduced. Transit subsidies have been reduced, basic welfare, at the same time as tuition fees have increased for post-secondary education. This cold northern country has no policy on affordable housing. For me, that's shameful. The services just mentioned are the social fabric of a decent and caring society. In such a society, there's a sense of social solidarity, of we're all in this together. My immigrant parents spoke of such a sense being part of what helped them to survive without any extended family the Depression of the 1930s in Toronto. But I don't see much of that sense in our society. Door-to-door mail delivery, rather than a privilege to be conferred by a powerful few on the population as a whole, could be a contributor toward building the sense of social solidarity I see as desirable. I think that's why this federal government and their Canada Post appointee want to do away with door-to-door mail delivery. This government is acting to discredit the very idea of government acting in the interests of the population as a whole. Their goal seems to be to shrink the role government can play in making life better for most. Imagine the nerve of telling us old folks that it's good to get out and exercise, as if we had to go pick up our advertising mail at a group mailbox in order to get exercise, and we had no idea that exercise is good for us, as if the sidewalks were regularly cleared of ice and snow. What arrogance. Militarism, glorifying war, at the same time reducing benefits for veterans with PTSD, near knee-jerk support for US foreign wars, for tax breaks for the rich, neglect of public infrastructure at great public expense in the long run. As a civil engineer, I know it's very cost effective to do ongoing maintenance of our infrastructure. To say nothing about the desecrating of the environment, the awful, punitive attitude to Native peoples. These are all policies pursued with single-mindedness by this gang of neocons. Not a single policy of theirs meets my smell test. They all stink. I can remember when many conservative-minded people were actually reasonable folk. Not so with Harper and Company. So, to get back to my sense of a society we could all be proud of, it would include mail delivery to our doors, as well as good health care for all, good education available to all, very much less consumption of fossil fuels. We could all have meaningful work and could again be pleased to be Canadian. Perhaps these ideas, these notions are utopian. Maybe so, but rather than the dystopia promoted by this government, I prefer a utopian dream. Thanks.
I think it's good to have a town hall, because we don't crawl out of our houses often enough and sit in a room together and discuss what really matters to us. Spend far too much time staring at our computers and being somewhat compartmentalized. And this is an opportunity for you to have your say. And this is what Canada Post should have done with all of you good folks before they decide to change the parameters of that public service that is yours. It's not theirs. And in this discussion, I think a lot of us in this room understand that the ideology that was referred to by Nick and Kevin started not yesterday, not 5 years ago, but about 30 years ago. The whole ideology began to become slowly warped. There's a bunch of people out there had to make us accept things eventually that at that point would have been unthinkable. And I don't want to go all the way back that far, but I will take you back to 2008, which is when the Harper government first came to power. Because make no mistake, what is happening to your post office is directly driven by this Conservative government. It's their ideology. One of the first things, coincidentally, when he did come to power, was the first group they decided to take a run at, and they've taken a run at many, as has been detailed, was Canada Post and the postal workers. And they had a postal charter review. And the Canadian Postal Charter Review is a mandatory review that's supposed to happen that sort of sets what Canada Post should do, because Canada Post is a crown corporation. It's not a company. It's a corporation that has a mandate, and that mandate is really not to make money. That mandate is not to do that and earn profits. Its mandate is to effect mail delivery to the citizens of Canada, basically 5 days a week, and to do that in a cost-efficient manner and improve service whenever possible, and do it within set times. And that's really what it is, and it's how they do that they're supposed to review. So in 2008, in that charter review, they said, well, let's talk to Canadians. So they appointed, as their person who headed up this investigation, a gentleman named Bruce Campbell. And being that they wanted to make sure they had an objective person who wasn't biased, they picked Bruce Campbell, who had incidentally had written a book about privatizing and deregulating Canada Post and why it would be a great idea. So right off the bat, that's why I'm going back 5 years, we can smell a rat. So I'm not going to dwell very long in that, other than to mention that that we achieved a great success in the union and the people of Canada, because we reached out to the people and said, do you really want your post office to be deregulated? Do you really want it to be privatized? Because it's a rich prize. I mean, there are all sorts of companies out there that would love to take and grab letter mail delivery to downtown Ottawa, downtown Toronto, downtown Vancouver. They're not so enthusiastic about grabbing a letter in downtown Toronto and trying to take it up to Equality. That's not really in their game. And that's what's happened in Britain. They've taken the best and they've left the rest to everybody else. And really the way a post office functions is to use the revenue from the up-close deliveries to finance the far-away deliveries. So the people spoke loudly. We did a postcard campaign, and even Bruce Campbell, based upon public input at the time, was forced to conclude that the people said, we want a big public post office, we want to make sure that it's not privatized, and we don't want it deregulated. So Canada Post and the Harper government learned something from that. They learned that they can't do that anymore. They've got to become much more sophisticated. So what they did is they made the plan. They made a great plan, actually. I'll give them that, because it was a great plan because it's worked to some extent, and we didn't have a clue it was happening. And they kept it secret from the union, and they kept it secret from the people of Canada until they decided it was an opportune time to spring it on them. So the first thing they did, they said, well, we need a report. We need a report from an objective board. Again, we're stressing objectivity, that will tell us what is going to happen with Canada Post in the future. And they knew there was another postal charter review coming in 2014, so I guess they decided to get ready early. So they decided to get the conference board. Now the conference board it's a right-wing think tank. You know, they do investigations, and they will, they'll do what they're either think they should do or asked to do. Now in this case, the objectivity was again suspect because Canada Post commissioned the report and paid for it, and Deepak Chopra. Now there are two Deepak Chopras. There is the philosopher and visionary Deepak Chopra that many of you are familiar with, and I think that if he was running Canada Post, we wouldn't be here. I think things would be much better. However, we don't have that Deepak Chopra. We have the Deepak Chopra, as Nick said, figures that seniors could use a bit of exercise. He's the villain. And notice since he said that, we haven't seen him anymore in front of a camera, have we? No. He's strangely vanished, and he's the CEO of Canada Post. They've got their other shills talking this up. But anyway, that Deepak Chopra actually sits on the board of directors of the Conference Board of Canada. So they commission the report, they pay for it, so we can well imagine what it's going to say, because it's going to say what it's told to say. So they dropped this report on the 23rd of April in 2013, and of course, it's all doom and gloom and no bright news. Canada Post, and it's big, easy to understand round numbers. By 2020, Canada Post will be losing $1 billion a year. And there is 1 million fewer pieces of letter mail in the system. So it's nothing complicated. It's kind of like what Dr. Evil does in those shows, right? $1 million, 2020. So, but what do they base these numbers on? Where did they get these figures? Well, the fact is they characterize Canada Post as being a money-wasting exercise, a drain on the taxpayers', pockets. But it's not true. Actually, Canada Post has earned a profit, not a big profit, nor should they, but they have managed to earn a profit in the last 17 of 18 years of operation. But they didn't earn a profit in 2011, and I don't blame them, because that was a year they locked their workers out, and then they went to the government, the same government, to try and get some instruction on how they could unlock the door and let these workers back in. Because Canada Post, once they locked them out, couldn't seem to figure out how to get them back in and working again. But they needed the government to assist them, who willingly, as they have with many other labor disruptions, gleefully accepted the task and ordered us back to work. It's pretty hard to make money when your workers are standing outside and you're not moving the mail. So they didn't make money then. So the conference board said, now there would be a good year to start our analysis of the trends in revenue. So they took the amount of mail that was in the system in the fall of 2011. That's where they got their mail decline statistics from. And in 2011, we just come back, finding the postal workers are back working, and there was tons of mail in the system. So there's an artificially high amount of mail. So they take that amount of mail and they compare that to the same quarter, the third quarter of 2012, exactly 1 year later, when there's a normal amount of mail in the system. So the decline looks like this. So then extrapolate or carry that decline forward to 2020, well, it looks like an alpine downhill ski run. That's what the mail volumes are doing, when in fact they're really doing that. So that's where they got the decline in mail volume statistic from. And they actually knew they were doing this, but you know, the truth is rarely sexy, and this is going to make our report look good. The other thing they did in terms of the money was they took the revenues and they estimated them. They said Canada Post is going to lose $250 million in 2012. That was their prediction. So this is the board, this conference board report, we'll talk more about it, but this is what Canada Post is basing the removal of your door-to-door delivery on. And I'll get back to that. So this is what, it's the only document. There isn't studies, there's only one study. So what in fact happened in 2012 was Canada Post made money. They made $98 million. So instead of losing 250, they made 98. So they missed the mark by $350 million. They got it wrong. But this is what they're predicting, the loss of, $1 billion by 2020. So that statistic's wrong as well. But that doesn't matter to them because, again, they've got the report, they're going with it. So they released this report, and, well, we've got to do something. So the very next day, they start to have their conversation with Canadians. And what that is they decide to go out and consult widely with the public. Well, they said they did. They actually visited 50 communities. And when I was at a meeting in Sault Ste. Marie, a very wise city councillor there said that actually amounts to 2.2% of all the communities in Canada. So that's who they consulted with. And did they talk to the people that they organized one of these? Actually not. They invited people, mostly from the business community, to closed-door sessions and said, what would you like to see your Canada Post look like? Well, the business community has a much different perspective. And that's why they didn't go to alternate day delivery, because businesses don't want to get their mail every other day. They want to get it every day. But that's where the conference board report said, well, we could look at going to CMB delivery, which is community mailbox delivery. We could look at, we're going to have to cut wages. We're going to have to raise the price of postage moderately. And so everything they sort of suggested magically has wound up appearing before us today. But anyway, they just couldn't take the conference board report and do it. They had to get the permission of Canadians. And that's why they divided on their consultation. So they began this consultation. Again, nobody's invited. You don't know about it. None of you know this was going on, it's safe to say, because I didn't even know it was going on. And I'm in the postal union. I'm a postal worker that represents 5,000 people in 50 communities over most of Ontario. And we heard these rumors about Canada Post people meeting with the mayors and city councillors and a few business people. We kind of wondered what's going on. And there's only 5 or 6 in our area, which is almost all of Ontario, so we didn't know quite what was up. But that was where they went out and got the permission of the public to do what they're going to do. So then they published their report called Our Consultation with Canadians. And then, that formed the basis of what they did then. Meanwhile, we have a report of our own. Union says, well, we should go and see what people think about the post office. And we decided to look at postal banking. And the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives said, postal banking would be a great idea. It's something Canada needs. You could put a postal bank in, and you could generate a bunch of revenue, which cross-subsidize, other Canada Post's other operations. Because letter mail is declining. I won't deny that. And we are potentially going to go into a period when Canada Post will begin to run small deficits. But if they change their whole mode of operation, they can, we can redefine what Canada Post is like. But we got to do that by talking to folks like you. Parcel business is booming. When you're not out here at the public meeting and you're at home on the internet, a lot of you are buying stuff online. Canada Post people are delivering that. So we're doing different kind of work. So the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives said postal banking is a great idea. So it's our report versus their report, our vision versus their vision. But December 11th, Canada Post dropped a bomb on all of this, and we didn't know about it either, because they didn't consult with the union, they didn't consult with you, and they announced we're going to take away to-the-door delivery for Canadians. But they couched this by saying, well, 2/3 if you don't have it already. So again, this is part of this government's ideology. It's politics of exclusion. Why should you have what others don't have? Why should you have a nice pension when others don't have it? Why should you have this when, clean running water in a First Nations community when you don't have it and other people don't have it? So it's this kind of politics of exclusion. So the fact is they dropped this, but there was another report that you didn't know about, and it was this report.
This is the one.
Canada Post had been investigating postal banking for 4 years prior to 2013. They investigated it right up to October in 2013, and they didn't tell anyone. They didn't tell you that
It's a secret.
in December 11th. It's a secret report. The only way we found it was there's a wonderful group of reporters called Blacklock's Reporters did a Freedom of Information request, and they obtained this report. Now, if you want to read this report, I invite you to, but it's really boring because 92% of it is redacted, which means all of the information has been removed because it's commercially sensitive. But there is a few little clues in here, tantalizing tidbits, like banking, a proven diversification strategy. So they talk about it, they've done it in other countries, and it's been a roaring success. Post-Italy, 71% of their income comes from the postal bank, cross-subsidizes the other operations. Another tantalizing thing. Size of the prize. So, if there's a prize and there's a size, it obviously must be good. What do you have to believe? What do we got to do to make you believe this is a great idea? So they had this. If this was a really crappy idea, and this was going to be a loser, all the information would be in there, and they'd be telling you it's a waste of time. So the fact that it's redacted proves they knew postal banking not only would work, it would actually earn more money than the amount they're going to save by taking away to-the-door delivery. In fact, potentially, they can actually give some people who now don't get to-the-door delivery. It would be a roaring success. So they're not playing fair with us, folks. A postal bank in Canada would mean everywhere you have a post office, you could go and do banking. I live in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and if I drive from Sault Ste. Marie to Sudbury, that's 320 kilometers, I have the opportunity to go to one TD Bank branch in that entire stretch. And I go through 16 small towns. So the TD Bank has said sayonara to Sault Ste. Marie to Sudbury stretch. They've abandoned all those small towns, but there's a post office in every one of those. And so I wouldn't have to get in the car and drive 78 miles to go to Espanola to do to deposit a check. I could just go to my post office and pick up my mail. If I was in Italy, I could pay for my SIM card on my phone and buy some more airtime. I could go and buy all sorts of stuff. I could go buy packaging. They do everything at these post offices because they got capitalism right. I mean, the people, Harper doesn't seem to understand how capitalism works. You have a known brand that's trusted. You have a network of retail outlets connected by an electronic merchandising system. You have the biggest vehicle fleet in North America. Why not leverage that? Why not make money from it? Oh no, they don't. And why? Because they want to privatize it. Canada Post is not dying, it's being murdered. It's being murdered by these things. Every good idea that comes along, they say, we can't touch it, we can't do it. That's why you've got this redacted study. That's why they've not consulted with you. That's why they're not talking to you. So this is a very winnable battle because it's really easy for people to get their head wrapped around. I like when somebody brings mail to my door. I don't want to have to put my coat on, bundle up the kids, walk down to see maybe if I got mail or didn't get mail. And what's wrong with it? Because it isn't costing any of the taxpayers a red cent. I mean, some public services, they say, well, they cost money, we have to cut them. But this is a public service where, even if you don't use the post office, why take it away from someone who does? Why take it away from a senior? Why take it away from a single mother with children? Why take it away from someone who doesn't have a vehicle? Because it's not hurting you. So they're trying to convince you it's going broke. They're trying to convince you that this is all necessary, but the way I characterize this whole thing is it's completely unnecessary. They could do a lot of diversification, but they simply failed to talk to people. So I'm glad we're out here today, and in terms of Hindenburg, it's going to have a huge effect in your community. Because you don't have any here right now. I mean, there's no CMBs in this area. So where are they going to put them? They're going to walk up. There's five CMBs in the whole area. Thank you. A subject matter expert. And I know of what I speak because I delivered mail on the street from 1975 to 2007. I put 32 years as a letter carrier on the street. And now I'm a full-time rep. So I understand what mail delivery is about. I understand what it means to the people of Canada. So I think what we really have to get our head wrapped around is this: we can mobilize on this. We've got to hold our elected officials' feet to the fire. And we've got to say, why is this study not been publicized? We have a postal charter that's supposed to be gone right now in 2014. Why is that not occurring? Why did you preempt it and bring out your plan, and why is this now being ignored? So I'm sick and tired of seeing women picked on, students picked on, Aboriginal people, farmers to the wheat board, you name it, everybody. Harper's taking a run at you. I mean, they're even taking a run at your right to vote right now with their so-called Fair Elections Act. You know, they weren't far off in 1984 when they talked about newspeak and doublespeak. I mean, that's what we're dealing with. So I'm gonna wrap it up there. I think that you should have your say, and I think we're gonna have some ideas about how we can make that happen. But thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions once the rest of the panelists have finished speaking.
And if I could just throw in just a quick thing about Peter's word about postal banking. One of the first things that I thought of when I heard about this, it is scandalous that this was suppressed and not even widely reported in the media. But one of the first things I thought of was, I wonder how the big Canadian banks feel about the prospects of postal public banking on a not-for-profit basis. And what would the Harper government think of that? Anyway, let's turn it over quickly to Shellie, and then we'll move on.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks for coming out, and thanks for having me as part of this. Cuts to postal service and home delivery are part of a larger program of austerity that has been underway for over 30 years. Governments of all stripes, whether it's Paul Martin's Liberals or Stephen Harper's Conservatives, or in the UK, whether it was David Cameron's Labour government or Margaret Thatcher's Conservative government. Governments have been pushing austerity programs under the guise of reining in public debt and reducing public spending. Under cover of austerity, governments and corporate interests seek to undermine the valued institutions and social programs and to reduce the size and scope of government. The right see the modern welfare state as an encroachment on individual freedoms and would like to replace most of its welfare provisions through the marketplace or private charity. I thought it might be useful for the discussion tonight to have a clear definition of what austerity means before delving into how it's playing out here in Canada. So this definition comes from Webster's dictionary. Austere, it means severe or indiscipline. Austerity measures mean strict measures that are undertaken by government to bring expenditures in line with revenues, a state of reduced spending and increased frugality. In short, proponents of austerity argue that governments are living beyond their means, that they're not disciplined and they're not frugal. The message to the working class: our expectations are too high, not reasonable, and therefore we require to be disciplined so that we learn how to be frugal. The last two federal budgets were chock-a-block full of spending cuts and measures aimed at reducing compensation for federal sector workers by changing labor relations regimes and maintaining a 3-year wage freeze, reducing pension coverage, sick and disability leave. The Harper government, claiming that it was concerned that EI was a disincentive to work, toughened EI rules and took millions of dollars from mostly seasonal workers, leaving them no option but to take low-wage jobs, often meaning that they had to travel great distances from their homes to work at jobs that they really couldn't support their families on. Between 2006 and 2011, 79 community organizations, agencies, non-governmental organizations, research bodies, and programs have been canceled or their funding has drastically been reduced. And I went looking today on the net to sort of try and collect all of the groups and organizations and foundations that have been cut, and this is it. And I can say that I'm a board member of the Childcare Advocacy Association of Canada, one of the national organization that does advocacy for childcare, for a national childcare program. And we currently work virtually. The board volunteers. We don't have an office. We don't have phones. We don't have computers. But we continue to try and cobble together people that will remain committed to making childcare an issue for our governments. And we're able to do that in large part with the support of unions.
How many groups on that list, Shellie?
79. There's 79 groups on this list. Also among those cuts, the National Aboriginal Health Organization and the Aboriginal Women's Health Organization, which saw crucial programs on suicide prevention, women's health, and diabetes. They cut the Women's Health Contribution Program, which funded 6 women's health organizations across the country. And we know that there are more spending cuts in the offing. $11 billion will be chopped from federal spending between 2014 and 2015. And with it, tens of thousands of decent paying jobs will be lost. And this austerity is not limited to the federal government. Since the 1990s, both conservative and liberal governments in Ontario have cut over 18,000 hospital beds, deeper than any province in the country. Hospital funding has been sharply cut as a share of Ontario's healthcare budget over the last 30 years. And I want to go back to this because we know that the private sector has been after the LCBO for quite a number of years, and we've been able to push them back here in Ontario.
Privatized.
Yeah, to privatize. So it's the corporations that want access to markets in liquor control. And we know that in Calgary, in Alberta, they were successful in privatizing their liquor control board, and that there's been a few runs at Ontario's liquor control board. So it really does fit with capitalist logic. They want access to markets. They don't want to see governments delivering programs on a not-for-profit basis, but in order to deliver services. And no matter where you go, whether it's BC or New Brunswick, governments are threatening back-to-work legislation as a way to force workers to accept concessions in their working conditions, such as control over booking of hours and 2-tier health benefits. Working people and the programs and the services that we provide are being disciplined under austerity measures. The broader nonprofit voluntary sector is really being corporatized. Governments are throwing services out into the community, and the community-based sector into the nonprofit sector, and then we're being put into incredible competitive bidding processes in the community. We are facing large multinational corporations that are wanting to come into Canada, and I can use childcare as an example, where a large multinational childcare corporation which trades the care and education of young children on the stock exchange. So we have investors from around the world making money off of childcare in our country, and the Edlian, the large corporation, wanted to capture 10% of the childcare market. So that's the logic of capital there, is that they're commodifying and marketizing and commercializing human need. And the community-based agencies that deliver many services are now having to go into competing with large corporations or getting involved in social bonds. It's a really difficult time in the community when we operate on budgets that are not, and we're, in the community, we often deliver services at below cost. Corporations would never deliver services at below cost. And yet I know that many that deliver community-based services feel a real sense of commitment to the people that they're providing services to, and governments count on that. And so as they push more and more programs and services out of government and into the community, the privatization is really frightening. The corporatization, the marketization, the commodification of human need is really frightening for me. Proponents of austerity have fought doggedly to reverse the policies and political orientation of a welfare state on the grounds that it uses the corrosive power of the state, i.e. the tax system, to redistribute wealth and enhance economic equality. But I think that it's really important, because if we go back to what I said earlier about we're being disciplined, about being frugal, there are winners and losers in austerity. And it's working people, it's communities, it's public programs and services that seniors and children, the sick and the elderly rely on. They're the losers. Canada's the loser. Or Canadians and residents
Most
are the
Canadians.
losers.
Most, but not all.
Yeah. On the other side of the austerity agenda, we see that somehow our federal government can afford corporate tax cuts of roughly $6 billion since Harper took office in 2006. And we can somehow afford a 2% cut in the goods and services tax that is costing government, or as a draw away from government revenue, at a staggering $12 billion a year. And while government goes after EI cheats, they turn a blind eye to corporate $29 billion in unpaid taxes by corporations, and the trillions of dollars that are leaving this country into tax havens, through tax loopholes. They turn a blind eye to that. And I want to end by saying this, so that while we know all of our families and friends and ourselves who see this downward pressure on our wages, benefits, and more difficult working conditions, we're doing more with less, we're living on less. I thought it was, I went looking on the internet today and looked at the top salaries of the top Canadian chief executives, who were on average earning $7.69 million in 2013, which was 235 times more than the median income of $45,000 earned by Canadian workers. So there are winners and losers in austerity, and I think that Canada Post is just one example of a larger agenda, and I think that's why I feel very hopeful about tonight, is that we've got to start talking to people about what's going on and understanding the connections between what happens at Canada Post, what happens with the Child Care Advocacy Association, what is happening in the broader community sector as they try and cope with decreased spending and delivering services. Thank you.